This week in gaming may be signaling the end for physical game sales. Battlefield 6 got a massively transformative update. It turns out that the insane cost of RAM may be due to something more nefarious than AI data centers and much more. Battlefield 6 got yet another transformative patch this week. This one rebalanced all of the weapons in the game, prioritizing more consistent recoil patterns with an emphasis on tap firing at range. The patch also changed the damage multipliers for all body parts, which generally means that headshots and upper body shots will give you a noticeably faster TTK than a mix of limb shots and other things. These changes have had a big impact on the average gunfight. Being more deliberate, avoiding spray and pray behavior, and tap firing at range is yielding much more consistent kills for me. However, it is annoying that some guns seem more negatively affected than others. Some folks are finding that their favorite gun loadouts feel unchanged, while others are complaining that their once go-to build is now a pea shooter. On top of the balance changes, DICE also implemented several netcode fixes and enhancements. However, players are reporting unusual deaths where they die in a handful of frames to weapons that don't have that sort of stopping power. I experienced this a bit in my initial testing, so hopefully it's something DICE can sort out quickly. Xbox and PlayStation are moving to end the sale of physical games. Sony announced that they will cease production of PlayStation game discs in 2028. This is hot off the heels of Sony removing over 500 different movies and TV shows from the accounts of people who bought them on the PlayStation Network shop. Affected users can watch their purchased media until September 1st, when they'll be removed from your account indefinitely without a refund. They also announced that they're shutting down the PlayStation 3 and PS Vita storefronts in July 2027. Meanwhile, Xbox is internally testing a disc-to-digital system that gives users a digital game license on their account for games that they own a disc copy of. That digital license will transfer to the account used with the disc, so if you give your disc to a friend, the digital license is also moved to your friend's account. Industry insiders suspect this in anticipation of Xbox phasing out physical game media with their upcoming Project Helix console. Physical copies of games have become a very hot commodity these days due to their increasing rarity, and while many games can be purchased in a physical format, the actual data on the disc or cartridge varies from being an entire playable copy of the game all the way down to just the basic license key that activates the game on your console, letting you download it over the internet. Many games also require day one updates to fix major issues that weren't included in the disc copy. All in all, it's just a rough time for people that actually want to own a copy of the game that they paid for that doesn't rely on servers or licensing agreements to remain accessible. These issues are the sort of thing that the Stop Killing Games initiative is trying to solve. Unfortunately, they recently hit a roadblock with the US government voting against the proposal this week. Bizarrely, members of the committee that voted against the proposal also called private servers for games illegal, so it's unclear how well they even understand the issues covered in the proposal. Early testing of AMD's FSR 4.1 upscaler on the Steam Machine is showing promising results for potential owners. The Steam Machine has faced quite a bit of criticism for its price-to-performance ratio compared to competing consoles and custom PCs. The good news for the Steam Machine is that AMD recently added FSR 4.1 support to RDNA 3 GPUs, including the one inside the Steam Machine. And according to Digital Foundry's testing, FSR 4 performance mode can match the image quality of FSR 3 while delivering significantly higher frame rates. And while the initial benchmarks of the Steam Machine were done on FSR 3, FSR 4 should narrow that gap a little bit, but it doesn't let the Steam Machine completely off the hook. The top 3 RAM manufacturers are facing a major lawsuit alleging that they've engaged in price fixing to artificially drive up the cost of their products. Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron have all been named in a class action lawsuit in the US for their alleged concerted anti-competitive behavior between 2016 and 2018, causing prices for RAM to balloon at the time. The lawsuit also highlights the fact that the extreme technical requirements to manufacture RAM means that competition in the market is somewhat impossible, giving these companies an effective monopoly. Together, the 3 companies represent roughly 90% of all RAM manufacturing on Earth. This also isn't the first time that these companies have been sued, let alone lost in court for RAM price fixing. SK Hynix and Samsung were both fined in the hundreds of millions of dollars back in 2005 for the exact same thing. Now, obviously, this lawsuit is aimed at a time period well before the AI data center craze went into effect, so to speak, but it doesn't mean that additional price fixing isn't going on still. It just means that the lawsuit that's been building is focusing on older data. Circling back to our friends at Xbox, it sounds like their layoff and studio closure bloodbath is continuing to gain momentum ahead of an official announcement. This week, Hitman and 007 First Light developer IO Interactive announced a round of layoffs following Xbox pulling out of a deal to finance their upcoming game, codenamed Project Fantasy. IO says they're still 100% committing to making the game, but they have to adapt to this new reality and its short-term consequences. An Xbox spokesperson said that they expect their company to invest about the same in content as last year, and what's changing is really more of where they're investing and what kind of projects they're backing. Project Fantasy is an online fantasy RPG, so maybe Xbox are pulling out of live service or MMO style games. But considering the massive success of live service Hitman games and 007 blowing past sales expectations to become the studio's biggest selling title to date, you would think that IO Interactive may have earned a little more confidence from Microsoft. Reports also suggest that Xbox is considering closing Arcane Studios, which is currently developing a game based on Marvel's Blade. They're also weighing layoffs at Obsidian Games on top of the growing list of studios they're potentially closing. Reporting by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier says that we'll know more about the situation next week. In perhaps the greatest fumbling of what appeared to be an easy-to-secure bag, Dead or Alive 6 has been delisted from sale while its remaster is sitting at a mostly negative review on Steam, despite being marketed as the definitive version of the 2019 fighter. On paper, Dead or Alive 6 Last Round promised a current-gen refresh with a new photo mode, faster costume progression, 5 DLC characters included in the roster, and updated visuals for modern hardware. In reality, players found it to be a much less impressive quote-unquote upgrade. Reports note the visual improvements appear extremely limited, with only one stage receiving a noticeable lighting pass, while the rest of the game looks largely unchanged. Games Radar reported that there's also still hundreds of DLC items for sale, with many of the prices being even more than the old game. And it's missing some of the crossover characters that players were expecting. This has made the re-release feel particularly cash grabby, especially considering that there's already a Dead or Alive game in development. Tactical shooter Ground Branch is finally leaving early access after nearly 8 years. It's set to hit version 1.0 on July 16, marking a major milestone for a game that's been quietly building a loyal audience since its early access launch back in 2018. Version 1.0 is being pitched as the game's biggest update yet, with improvements across AI, environments, visuals, animations, inventory systems, player interaction, and general immersion. It also brings back Operations, the game's campaign-style framework, starting with a new prologue set in the mountains of northwest Pakistan. The 1.0 release won't be the end of development either. The devs say this is the start of the game's next phase, with additional campaign chapters and more missions planned through the rest of 2026 and into 2027. We also got a new game announcement that really piqued my interest this week. Guns of Eschaton is a Wild West FPS roguelike that blends deliberate gunplay with Souls-like inspired progression and survival mechanics. The game also carries a little extra weight because it was one of the final projects worked on by Viktor Antonov, the art director behind Half-Life 2, who also had a major influence on Dishonored before his passing in 2025. The gameplay focuses on things like managing ammo, customizing weapons, occult abilities, talismans and perks, and studying enemy weaknesses through a codex system. The goal seems to be making every encounter a balance of tactical positioning and resource management, while shooting the dome off some supernatural enemies. The game will be playable solo or in online co-op, with campaign progression designed around repeated runs and experimentation. There is no firm release date yet. Now, if you want to see some behind the scenes on what it's actually like to develop your own video game, well, check out my latest devlog for Seabeams, a spaceship action RPG that I've been building for over 2 years now with my game studio, and it's coming along well. I'm really proud of some of the new environment visuals. I think you guys will enjoy the content. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.